There's a reason that repeat founders are the ones that raise more capital or have stronger exits or exit in the first place. And it's because they've built and they probably failed the first time.
A
And
lot of people get so engrossed with their idea that they don't know how to pivot, and that ends up being a very negative factor to them instead of they actually took on like an open
but
mindset.
you
And
see people that are 13 years old and they're like founding these huge companies or exiting, and it's insane to see, but I see it more as this is what's possible than I'm not there type
So
of
I
thing.
guess for any students out there who might be listening to this, what's one of the takeaways from your book that you think just really applies to them and would help them in their lives?
I would say I have a concept of the leveraged operator. What's up, everybody? My name is Reed Nocera. I'm the author of Internal Leadership. I'm 17 years old. I'm from Old Bridge, New Jersey, which is just 45 minutes outside of New York.
awesome. Yeah, I'm Rex. I'm also 17. I'm over in around Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm the host of the Start Smart podcast.
Okay, hi. I'm also 17. My name is Ria. I'm from San Jose, California, and I'm the host of the Reality Check podcast, which is tech ethics and entrepreneurship. Cool, let's get right
All of
into
us
it.
are 17.
Yeah, that's so crazy. So, Reed, what's your book about?
So my book is entitled Internal Leadership, and it's all about connecting principles of business to our own lives. I think that businesses, the way they're run, especially when they're run well, get things done and make an impact more than any individual can, but they're ran in the same ways that we're run in our own lives. So on a day-to-day basis, I have to plan out my day. I have to then execute the plan, and then m- in the bigger picture of things, I have to set a monthly goal and then say, okay, what am I going to do to get that? And what I do is say, okay, we have all these different types of internal roles that we can take and turn them into things within our own lives. And that's all taking things from business principles that already work. So I think that it's less of a how to do this type of thing and more of a way of thinking.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I've never heard of like people using that kind of like analogy with the business, different parts of business in your life. It's very unique, I think. How did you kind of, was there like a specific moment that kind of prompted you to start creating and think, oh, this is something that hasn't really been talked about before? Or was there like a specific person that you talked to and after that you kind of got the idea?
So I do this thing called drum corps. It's basically professional marching band. And in my first year that I ever did drum corps, I was a freshman in high school, and I think I was the only high schooler there. Everyone else was in college. And one of the techs we had, his name's Joe McSweeney. I don't know if he remembers when he would talk about this, but he would basically say that we're running our drum line like a business. And I'm pretty sure he works at Fidelity Investments in Boston or Connecticut area. And he would basically make everything about we're cashing in checks, we're not filling out lottery tickets, basically. And that sort of stuck with me. And I took that thinking in a more broad sense, and instead of thinking of it as business in a more tangible way, but more of like a intentional way, and you're living your life intentionally. So as I've evolved beyond the drum corps I was in then, I've sort of taken that mindset and made it my own. Now today, I think that in drum corps, you're essentially your goal is perfection, which is something that's impossible. And it's kind of funny that we're actively pursuing 14 hours a day of rehearsal, trying to be perfect, knowing that at the end of the season, there's going to be the last note we play from like that entire performance. We're going to know that in that performance, we maybe messed up once, and that's okay. But I think that the power in that is knowing you wouldn't even have gotten close to that if perfection wasn't your goal. But with the structure you built for yourself and the business that you have for intentionality, that's sort of what drove everything to that point. And I think that when people come back from drum corps, so I come back to drum corps and I'm living my normal life again, people forget that they did all of that in a 3 month span and they basically became the best of the world at what they do in a 3 month span. And I think that as a community, a drum corps community, we have to sort of internalize those lessons after drum corps and take them beyond. So that's sort of my calling. I wouldn't say that this in by no means is a drumming book, but I think that the principles are definitely the root of everything. And without that experience, there would be nothing. That's definitely the messages to everything.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly am kind of like shocked when you say like 14-hour days. Like, that's insane. I think students live some of the most intense lives, and a lot of the stuff you're talking about can really apply to students. So I guess for any students out there who might be listening to this, what's one of the takeaways from your book that you think just really applies to them and would help them in their lives?
I would say I have a concept of the leveraged operator, and I'd say that's probably the most important concept within the book. It falls right at the end of part 2, which is talking about execution, and it sort of bridges that gap between thinking of your long-term goals and thinking of where you're at. You take the things you know how to do and you apply leverage to them. So say I'm really good at one thing, say you're really good at thinking in terms of like technical skills, so math, say you're really good at math, who says that you can't use those abilities to think in English terms or make your history class feel more like that and apply that leverage thinking in that way? It's a very um, broadly applicable concept. So it's not necessarily something that I could say, okay, you have to do this to make it leverage. But I think that thinking in terms of what output you can and how are you or what inputs you have and how are you going to make the most of it. So just using your resources in that sense. So I'd say for students especially, that's probably number one.
Right, like focus on their specific strengths instead of trying to look at everyone else and seeing like I feel like yeah, well, a lot of students I think they see what other people are doing. I think we all do as high school students. I think all of us can attest. So we kind of compare ourselves to a lot of other people, and when we see someone else's strength, we think that we also kind of need to catch up to them in that aspect, right? But I think it's really hard to do. But we should always find our own path and use our own strengths instead of trying to look at everyone else, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that means you should ignore your weaknesses. If anything, I think you should be focusing on your weaknesses, but through the lens of your strengths. So taking what you do know and thinking about the concept of the gain that you've made instead of thinking about the gap. There's a book about that by Dan Sullivan, his name is The Gap and the Gain. It's a very powerful book, and it's especially for students. It's a good book to think about just because you look back and you say, I've done all this stuff and I'm not, we don't do that a lot of times. Like in my calculus class, I don't think about 5 years ago, I didn't know how to do y equals mx plus b, like all these things. And it's amazing when you think of it like that. And you sort of have to see that gain and then understand there is a gap there. And if I want to be successful, maybe I have to do something that I'm not good at. But you have to think of it as how am I going to get there instead of I just have to get there type of thing.
I think what Rex was talking about comparison really like struck me also because I was definitely having like a period of time in my life where I just like constantly felt like I was always behind or like was comparing myself to others. But yeah, I agree. Like I think thinking of your own weaknesses and comparing it to like what you've previously done can really help you actually improve yourself rather than looking at what everyone else has and stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah, I
yeah. And by no means does that mean that I don't compare myself. I mean, I think it's very hard, especially in social media, but in a professional world, on LinkedIn even, which is social media. But you see people that are 13 years old and they're like founding these huge companies or exiting, and it's insane to see. But I see it more as this is what's possible than I'm not there type of thing. And I think comparison is good. Just don't let it kill you. You know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was about to say something similar as well. I think, especially those of us on LinkedIn, I think in the past like few years or like even like past year, there's been a really large surge of like these high school students and even middle school students on LinkedIn, and I feel like that's great. You can take it as motivation, seeing all these things that other people have done, as you said, doing what's possible, right? But I think the warning is that like students shouldn't fall into that trap of like as you said earlier, like comparison. I think it's really easy to look at what other people have done and be like, "Dang, I need to do what they're doing and get into their field just to like follow the crowd," instead of actually finding their own path. But it's a great resource, I think, social media as a way to push each other forward, right?
Yeah, I don't think I would be writing a book or even I wouldn't have even been in drum corps if I didn't compare myself to some extent. I think that's what drives you to achieve things is saying, okay, this is possible. But I don't think that you should make someone else's achievements your standard or what makes you happy.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, just going back to you like writing your book and stuff, what was the process to writing a book and getting it published? I mean, I know you talked about in previous conversations how like that process was obviously new to you. But yeah, what did it take from like, having this idea to literally like publishing a book?
So it all started out skipping the backstory of things is I wrote out originally this book was going to be entitled Universal Leadership, and it was going to be about connecting the principles of my town's mayor to the way that my dad works and runs his side of like his business and stuff. And what it basically was going to say is leadership is a universal language. But what I sort of figured out from that is why try to be dependent on other people to build a framework when I could take a framework from other people and instead of trying to like cross reference it, all this mess, just bring it all into yourself and it'll do the same exact message without the complexities of trying to make some comparisons. And I think that that was the first pivot. So getting back to the point is the writing the book, in the writing phase, you pivot a million times. I probably pivoted on like a big scale or like the themes of the book or the structure of the book 5 times. And then after that, within every single little chapter, there's micro pivots that get made is how am I going to phrase these paragraphs? How am I going to write this chapter in a way that gets the point across? And I think that it's important to not stay attached to your original goal just because it's what's going to look cool or what's going to feel good. I was going to, even after I decided to make it internal leadership, I was going to try to interview CEOs, COOs about the concepts just because it was going to be cool to get those people, or maybe a little bit beyond just the coolness, but just because those people would give me like the platform or whatever. But I decided it's not worth it to spend literally 40 hours a week just trying to send out emails to thousands of people just to get like 4 responses. So I think don't get attached to your original vision and pivot. And then another thing is you're writing the book for the person that you're trying to become, not the person you are, especially as a kid. It's like, by no means am I perfect. I probably struggle with implementing some of the things that I talk about, but that doesn't mean I don't think in the way that the book talks about. My whole entire way of living is centered around it, but there's still areas for improvement. So you have to write the book with that in mind because it also opens up the ceiling to things is if you're not even reaching the top of your book, then the person that's 5 steps ahead of you probably isn't either. And then when it comes to like the publishing side of things, you're going to have to rewrite the book probably like 4 times, even pivots aside. I had to go in August. I thought the book was done. And I was like, okay, cool. I go back, I read chapter 1. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know how to write. And you sort of have to do that over and over again until the language just becomes something that is natural to you and is the same no matter what. And then you have to rewrite it. And I'm realizing, okay, there's different things that like small details like, am I capitalizing the name of the internal CEO or do I capitalize a specific term? And then you sort of have to make all those decisions. And AI makes that very easy to do is I can, especially Claude, is you can go in, basically say, okay, change this document to only capitalize these letters, just follow the same language. And that makes it easier. But it's those small things that you don't notice, but you have to pay attention to those. And then when it comes to like releasing the book, there's a lot of just different personal decisions that go into that. I'm trying to do it in a way that it's fulfilled through Shopify or sold through Shopify and then fulfilled through different routes depending on where people live and things like that. But I think that's more of like you go on YouTube and watch 100 videos and sort of make your personal decision. So if anyone listening is trying to make a decision on that, I would say try to make your own judgment on that. Don't follow exactly what I did. There's so many different variables that have to be accounted for. And then now even the marketing side of the book is just that stays forever and that can go to wherever you want. And that's what I'm trying to figure out now.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of what you said, I really like a lot of what you said. And I think it honestly it connects to life itself, a lot. I think doing these type of projects, whether it's like businesses, writing a book, all these different projects that you might be doing, a lot of them, this whole process, like you just described a super intricate process, a super detailed process that takes a year, more than a year. For maybe like most authors, it takes like more than 5 years or something like that. But I think it
Yeah.
really does connect to life, this whole like journey. Even what you said about pivoting, that's like I feel like that connects to so many different things. Like if you look at these businesses, like a lot of people get so engrossed with their idea that they don't know how to pivot, and that ends up being a very negative factor to them instead of if they actually took on like an open mindset. And all these life skills I think you've learned through this process is very valuable, right? Like learning how to, as you said, pivot. This entire process of like kind of ideation to creation to the execution. And also, the only thing I was wondering, because I think a lot of students and people or founders, aspiring entrepreneurs are struggling with is kind of having the motivation to go through this entire process, right? I think a lot of people, they're like at the beginning, oh, I'm gonna make this business. I'm gonna do this project. And then they realize how much work it takes. Cause you just described that, and I like, if I ever thought about writing a book, I would be super kind of bummed out, because I'm like, that sounds like too much work for me, you know? And I think it's hard for people to stay motivated when they figure out how much like dedication and consistency you have to put into doing a project like that, right?
Yeah, I think that the big thing about that is making it a internal thing and internal leadership, that type of thing. At worst, even if you don't even publish the book should have helped you as a human being, and you should have came out writing the book as a better human being. And the ROI on that alone is enough to justify it. I didn't know how to talk about any of these concepts with like the articulation I have now because or until now because I wrote the book and there's different just things that were put into every single word and organizing your thoughts and reorganizing them over and over again. That benefits you more than just the output of the projects done. And I think even for businesses is people have to think about their first business and their first startup they start as less of I'm trying to make money, especially at our age, and more of a I'm trying to build something. And even if everything fails, I just learned so much and I'm going to do it again and become even better. I think that there's a reason that repeat founders are the ones that raise more capital or have stronger exits or exit in the first place. And it's because they've built and they probably failed the first time. And you have to be okay with that and understand that even if nothing happens, I got something out of it. So find that thing that you're getting out of it and go with it. And know that be comfortable knowing that if everything else fails, if no books sell, I'm okay because I benefited enough already.
That's insane. I don't know if I'd be okay with that. Yeah, but like going with what you guys were talking about with motivation and stuff, I think it's interesting because it sounds like you were really invested in the problem that you were solving, which is something that a lot of founders look for when they're starting a company. So I think that probably really helps, like, not that I would know, but it probably really helps with finding something that you're motivated enough to work for that doesn't necessarily return any result other than like you learning from that experience. But I mean, what was your kind of, other than that kind of like motivational thing, what was your challenge or lesson that you kind of got from this process of writing the book?
This is a good question. Challenge. So I think that being able to accept that I was able to write about this in the first place, I think that imposter syndrome, I think that's the word to describe it, is you're writing this book and even to make the decision to say, okay, I know enough about the world to write a book, it's hard. And being able to then not only just put the words on the page, but then have to explain to people that you're writing a book. And like, I'm going to school with my peers and talking to them about my book. And it's like, I didn't want to talk about my book. I blushed every time that I would like have to bring that up or not last year, but like 4 months ago. And now I'm able to talk about it with pride. And I think that that was probably the biggest challenge to overcome is just accepting the fact that you are able to do that and not doubting yourself.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I relate to that so much because having this podcast and recording these things it took me a lot to share that with people from my school. So if anyone from school is watching this, hi. Like, if anyone from your guys' school is watching this too. But yeah, I think it's kind of crazy how like small our schools are, but like how big it feels to like share things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even then it was hard for me to even I didn't want to bring up the book to anyone and I probably didn't even tell people that I was writing it until month 3 because number 1 I didn't want to let people down if it didn't happen, but I think that I didn't have the confidence and it takes time, but it feels good to talk about it now. So I think being okay with not talking about it, number 1, and then number 2, knowing that it's going to be embarrassing the first time you talk about it and you're going to stumble upon your words and you just kind of have to be okay with that. And I think that if anyone out there is feeling that in if they've started a business and haven't talked about it or are afraid to talk about it, we feel the same way. And if there's one thing you could take out of it is do it anyway. And eventually you're going to be proud of that. And you're going to be talking to people and you're going to feel good talking about it.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think in it, a lot of things that are in the public eye, like our podcasts, your book, it's you hear it all the time. Like, don't care what people other people think, right? But I think it's really hard to do, and it takes a lot of like effort and kind of confidence in yourself. Even as you said, like these founders, maybe like their first project, they might fail, right? But I think there must be a way to kind of gain that confidence even though you're failing. Like if you know the gain that you're gonna get out of it, I think that's all you need. But it's definitely super hard to kind of overcome that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about like people at school watching this and thinking about how honestly, like I don't know anyone from either of your guys' schools and how like I guess this could be kind of linked to societal pressures that some companies face, but your like audience or your customers is not always just like the people around you, so you have other opinions to think about, you know? So for your example, your book, you had to think about people who are kind of similar to yourself or like yourself a few months ago or something like that. And then for our podcast, a similar thing. So I guess it's kind of like, especially with the internet, we get to expand our audience to people who like we don't even personally know. So that lets us kind of let go of opinions of people that we do know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, the audience is like that I was thinking the target audience or like the ideal viewer for me was someone like me, you know? Like
Yeah.
I was reaching out to people that I wanted to like learn about and I was thinking like if someone else were kind of in the same shoes as me, it's like the same as having like a coffee chat or anything like that. Like this is just like another virtual coffee chat like of someone that's kind of is the same as me, you know? That's how I kind of approach it. I'm not sure about you guys though.
Yeah, for sure. You stole the words out of my mouth when you said the same person as me. I was literally thinking that as you were saying it. I think that you're writing when you're writing it or you're doing the podcast for yourself, I think that's the best thing to do is make it about yourself and let other people enjoy it if they want, but make it about you. And then the people that need to hear about it will hear about it, and you're not trying to cater to other people.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of branching off of that, I'm wondering now that you've kind of written this book and you've learned all this technical stuff, but also kind of the art of writing a book, what are your kind of plans for the future, if you can give us a hint?
So I think that my plans are not to write like become philosopher guy. I want to be more of someone that uses my philosophy to do something to make impact beyond just the words on the page. So what that means for me personally is being part of probably a startup, but I don't want to set myself in a bubble where I have to pick startup. I want to be part of the reason that a company does well and people make money, but I don't necessarily want to tie myself to any specific role. Even if one of you guys have a business idea that I believe in, I feel like if it's the best business idea that I believe in, I will join that business, even if that means I don't get the founder role or whatever. But if I have an idea that I think is going to change the world, that'll be my idea and I'll go with that. I think it's about what I want to do in my career is invest my and my knowledge, and that's me investing in the business instead of me trying to just start a business, if that makes any sense. I think that obviously that's very broad, and there's so many different trajectories that that can take. If I'm in college and I see a startup that I believe in, maybe I'll join it there. If I don't necessarily want to tie myself to that, to a startup right out of college, maybe I'll join growth equity or a venture capital firm and go there for a couple of years, pivot to like a chief of staff role and then try to climb that ladder. But I think that being part of something that or being part of a builder role is something important to me. And eventually, if I have like more tangible ideas that I can give out, less of ways of thinking, but more of here's how I did it type of thing, that's when I'll write another book. But at that point, it won't be like I'm writing a book for my job. Ideally, I'll be writing the book. And if I wanted to sell it for free, it wouldn't have any financial impact on me. That's more of like my personal impact project, I think.
I think it comes down to what like a person's values is and like your like aspirations, right? As you said, like you're not putting that, you're putting yourself in this bubble, which is awesome. I think it's great to be open minded to see like the opportunities that come your way. I think all of us during this age, we kind of are kind of trying to find ourselves, find our identity, like about what we want to do in the future. And I think that's awesome. I think a lot of people our age kind of just live life like day by day without kind of thinking about. I mean, it's good to stay in the present, but I think it's also important to kind of understand what you want to like achieve, because you only live once, right? And um it's really hard to, cuz like if you think like for me, that question I ask myself is like, if I'm like 80 years old and I look back on my life, what would I have like wanted to like achieve, or whatever I had what I wanted to like understand, right? And I think for me, like that kind of comes like, if I only kind of sought after like doing like working or like getting money or something like that, I wouldn't be like as satisfied, I think. And I think it goes like, as you said, like doing something kind of world changing that can impact as many people as possible.
Yeah, I think that sorry, people put a lot of their value in choosing their career on money, and I'm not saying that I'm not factoring that in because if anything, working at a startup gives you the equity and you're probably gonna make a lot of money if you do well. But I think that you have to find a way to be okay with giving up your time, giving up other things in order to get that money, and maybe it's worth it for you, but that's more of a personal thing. I think it's very important for people to like think for their own selves, and if you're the best at something, you're going to get the money you deserve. So don't try to stress of, oh, the average salary for this is this. Do what you want and become the best at it.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome note to end on, looking at the future optimistically and hopefully aim high. Um, it was nice chatting with all of you guys. I think I learned a lot, and I will hopefully be applying that soon. Yeah.
Awesome.
It was awesome. Would
Yay.
love to chat with you guys soon.